Everyone. Welcome, welcome. We're gonna get started here in just a sec. We're just gonna give people a couple of, like a minute or so to get in here. Everybody's logging in. Hope you guys are having a good evening. And just to make sure you guys are in the right place, bold conversations about equity with Francisco Jimenez, the immigrant experience, a personal story. We're excited to have you all. And again, we'll kick off in just a sec. In the chat, you will find a sign-in link. Please make sure to fill that out to be entered into our Dr. Jimenez book giveaway. You don't want to miss that. And just so you know, please stay till the end so that you qualify to get the gift, because you have to be present during the time of the pool. Okay. Well, I think we can just go ahead and start. I'm sure more folk will come in and go as they please. So let's get started. So to kick us off, just some Zoom etiquette. Please stay on mute unless called upon. Update your name if you haven't already. Sometimes we come in as presenter access or some other funky name, so just make sure you update it to your appropriate name. You do have the option to type questions in the chat box, so utilize that tool. Please go to speaker view so you get a full size picture of me or whoever is presenting along with our slides. And please be present. We have a great presentation ahead of us, and we just really want everybody to be here. This is a recorded session. We do ask everyone to not record this session or take a screenshot for their personal archives to create a safe space for all participants, most of all. And we hope that you stay in here for the entire session. With that, I want to welcome Denise Williams, Chief Program Officer of Silicon Valley Education Foundation.
Thank you, Valeria. I'd like to again welcome all of you to Bold Conversations 2022-23. So happy that you have joined us. We are in for a great treat this evening, so let's just go ahead and move along so we can get to that exciting portion. But just want to remind you about Silicon Valley Education Foundation on behalf of our CEO and those that and our governing board and our cabinet, to let you know that we are guided by the belief that all students are capable of pursuing higher education and boosting their future economic mobility. The impact of our work is evident of a strong partnership with districts and donors and providing students access and opportunity so that they can move forward in an amazing, successful career as they move into meet the 21st century needs. Our vision is that every student becomes successful and a productive adult. And of course, our mission is that to deliver and advocate for STEM education, and it inspires underserved students to succeed in college and in all careers. So the initiative purpose is to just confront issues of race and equity in society and their impact on education. We want to ensure access and opportunity that leads to success for students of color, and of course, fulfill our obligation to respond to what is happening now so that these very deep conversations that we go into, these speakers that we hear are helping us support this initiative and hopefully adding value add to all the work that we do to provide a more equitable opportunities for students in our greater community. Outcome, shift mindset, encourage courageous conversation. This is what we do in this space, and this is what helps us move our thinking, helps us to continue to provide equitable opportunities. So this is the main underlying premise of this work. And just a quick thank you to the County of Santa Clara helping support this work. Thank you so much. So quickly, our 4 agreements, which we always review: stay engaged, speak your truth with respect. There'll be time for questions, comments, experience discomfort, because that's going to happen, especially when we speak in equitable opportunities. Sometimes it may be a little discomfort, but that's okay. And expect and accept non-closure. So you may not get your answer. You may still have an aha about something, and that will occur, but at some point we can revisit it, put that comment in the chat and see if we can bring some closure for you, but that can occur. So today, it's happening. We've always been so excited about hearing from Dr. Francisco Jimenez, and it's happening today. And we are so very proud to have him back, been around in our school areas, and to have him here at the foundation. I'm really excited about it. And we will also have a little challenge for you at the end. So before he gets started, I just would like to share with you that Dr. Francisco Jimenez is currently the Fay Boyle Professor in the Department of Modern Language and Literature and Director of the Ethnic Studies Program at Santa Clara University. He received his BA from SCU and an MA and Ph.D. in Latin American Literature from Columbia University under the Woodrow Wilson Fellowship. He has a collection of autobiographical short stories and many other amazing publications. I know you've heard of Breaking Through and The Circuit, just a couple of those that have graced our hands and been on our shelves for many years. And at the end, some of us will have an opportunity to get some of those books at the end of the event. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Francisco Jimenez.
Thank you so much, Dr. Williams, for that wonderful introduction. I feel very honored to be in your program. And I thank all of the people who are attending this presentation. Let me begin by telling you why I think the conversations, why it's important to engage in conversations and tell our stories. Because when we tell our stories, we make connections. And when we make connections, we break down all those walls that separate us from one another. And we can take comfort and we can rejoice in the fact that all of us are members of the human family, the one family, the human family. So I thank you for giving me the opportunity to tell you my story. My story is not unique, as I will mention later on. So I'll begin from the very beginning. I was born in San Pedro, Tlaquepaque, in the state of Jalisco, many, many years ago, as you can tell by looking at me. And my parents decided to cross the border, US-Mexican border, with hopes of leaving our poverty behind in Mexico and starting a new and better life for our family. So we ended up in Santa Maria, California, as you can see here in this, which is about 250 miles south of here. And in Santa Maria, we ended up living in a migrant camp called Tent City, as you see in this other. Tent City was not a city. It was a migrant camp that was established by Shihi farms for migrant workers. And go back to the previous time. And what Shihi did, he provided tents used during World War II for migrant workers. So the tent that you see there to your right, that's the tent that we lived in. The tall boy that you see there, that's my older brother, Roberto, who is a major character in my work. He's like my second father. And in front of Roberto is my little brother, whom we call Trampita. And Trampita in English means tramp. And we call him Trampita because about a quarter of a mile from Tent City was the city dump. And my family frequented the city dump to get things that we needed. And in one occasion, they found baby clothes and dressed Trampita in those clothes. And ever since then, we call him Trampita. But Trampita says to me, Panchito, no me digas Trampita en frente de las personas que saben español porque me da vergüenza. Don't call me Trampita in front of people who know Spanish because I get embarrassed. And I tell them, okay, Trampita. Next to Trampita, to your left, is myself. My nickname was Panchito. In Santa Maria, as I mentioned earlier, we pick strawberries, as you see in this next slide. This picture was taken the year that I left Santa Maria to go to Santa Clara University to go to college, the first in our family to go to college. My mother, to your left with a big hat, was still picking strawberries that year, and my little brother, Ruben, helping her pick strawberries. One of the things that I remember when we were picking strawberries that often crop duster planes would fly over and spray us with pesticides, spray the strawberries with pesticides. And we would have, our eyes would burn for a long time after they would spray. And any part of our body that was exposed sometimes would get red splashes. We used to get 60 cents a crate by the piece. And if we worked by the hour, we got paid 75 cents an hour. So, and the next slide, after the strawberry season was over, at the end of September, first part of October, we would go to the San Joaquin Valley around Fresno, Visalia, Modesto, and to pick grapes, as you see in this next picture. We used to cut the grapes and spread them on thick sheets of paper like you see here. And we used to get 5 cents for doing this work. The next picture, you see a road that's been picked completely. And in the valley, as you know, it gets very, very hot, even to 110 degrees by 11 o'clock in the morning. So with the heat, the grapes would dry on one side, and then after they would dry on one side, we would flip them over, as you see in this picture, next picture, and to dry on both sides. And so that's how you get your raisins. While we were picking grapes in this very hot environment, we were not provided with water. We had to bring our own water, and we were not provided with toilets. So whenever we had to relieve ourselves, we would hide. We would go away from the other workers and hide in the vineyards, and to relieve ourselves. And this was very humiliating, especially for women and like my mother. After they would dry, we would roll them up in the sheets of paper, and we used to get 1 penny for rolling each one of these units. Then after the grape season would be over, we would go to Corcoran, like you see in the next picture. It's another town in the San Joaquin Valley. And in Corcoran, we lived in 1-room cabins like the ones you see in the next one. These 1-room cabins were provided by the growers for farm workers. And so the cabins did not have any indoor plumbing, no electricity, and no heating. And during the months of November and December, during the cotton picking day period, it gets very, very cold. So to keep warm, my family would put the mattress on the floor, and all of us would sleep on a mattress and cuddle up to avoid the cold. As I mentioned, we used to pick cotton in Corcoran, as you see in this next slide. You can see the cotton fields in the back. That's my mother and Roberto in the middle, and myself making a bad face because I hated wearing suspenders. I used to complain to my mother constantly because I hated wearing suspenders, but she would say, Panchito, if you don't wear them, you won't be able to keep your pants up. So whenever our mother could buy us new clothes, she would buy us clothes that were 2 or 3 sizes larger. And her reasoning was, as you grow into your clothes and they will last you a longer time. And I understood what she meant, but I would always complain because I wanted to be like my father, who didn't wear suspenders. And for picking cotton, as you see in this next slide, we used to use these cotton sacks. The one in this picture, the length is 12 feet long. That's the kind of cotton sack my father used. My brother used one that was 10 feet long, and when I got my own cotton sack, it was 6 feet long. We used to get 3 cents a pound for picking cotton and working all day from sunup to sundown. The most my father ever picked was 200 pounds. Roberto was a better picker than my father. The most he ever picked was 250 pounds. And yours truly, I'm embarrassed to say, I was never a good picker. The most I ever picked was 100 pounds. But as you can see from this picture, you would strap the cotton sack around your shoulder or tie it around your waist. And as you advance the row, filling the cotton sack with cotton balls, it begins to weigh more and more and more. And you can imagine dragging the cotton sack behind you. When the cotton sack weighs maybe 80, 90 pounds, and then with the friction in the ground, dragging the cotton sacks caused a lot of back problems. My father suffered back problems just as my brother did, and so did I. The next slide, you can see after the cotton season would be over at the end of December, first part of January, we would return to Santa Maria to spend the winter months there. And we did not return to Tent City because there was an illness or an epidemic that hit the migrant camp. And many people, especially children, got very, very sick. And I suspect it was because of lack of sanitation. So the Santa Barbara County Department of Health came to Tent City and closed the migrant camp. They closed it down. And so we moved to another migrant camp called Bonetti Ranch and in Santa Maria. And Bonetti, the owner of this migrant camp, took barracks from World War II for migrant workers. So you can see one of the barracks there to your right. The barracks were nicer than the tents because we had a wooden floor. The tents, we had dirt floors. And we also had electricity. We did not have indoor plumbing, so we had to use the outside toilet. And we couldn't drink the water. The water was contaminated, so we had to go to the town in Santa Maria to get our drinking water from the gas station. The man that you see there with the hat, That's a friend of ours whose name was Don Pancho. Don Pancho, like my parents, did not have the opportunity to go to school. So like my parents, he never learned to read or to write. But Don Pancho was very intelligent, very talented. He knew a large number of folk tales. And so after work, we would sit around Don Pancho and we would listen to him tell us all these wonderful ghost stories about ghosts and legends. And when I was doing the research for my first book, I lamented the fact that I didn't have the opportunity to record all these wonderful folk tales that I heard from Don Pancho, because if I had been able to record them and then transcribe them, it would have been a bestseller. And Don Pancho represents to me many people in our communities who are very intelligent, very intelligent, very talented, very intelligent, but for various reasons, mainly because of poverty, they have to work to survive, are not able to go to school. But you can imagine how much richer and stronger our society would be if everyone would have the opportunity to go to school. Next to Don Pancho was caught by a border patrol raid and deported back to Mexico, so we never saw Don Pancho again. But when you read my work, Don Pancho, in some sense, is also the author of my work, because he sparked in my mind the art of storytelling. Next to Don Pancho is my father, and sitting on my father's lap is my little brother, Trampita. During the winter, we used to top carrots, as you see in this next picture. We used to dig them out of the ground and then top the green part, and then put the carrots in burlap sacks. We used to get, I think, 10 cents a sack for doing this work. And we used to top carrots right after it rained or while it was drizzling. So the ground would get very, very muddy. And during the winter, it gets cold. So you can imagine topping carrots in this environment. It was very, very difficult work. We also thin lettuce, as you see in this next picture. We used to use a short handle hoe, like you see in this picture, to thin lettuce. And we used to get $15 an acre for doing this kind of work. But as you can see from this picture, it's not a family picture, but you can see from this picture that it's stoop labor, and it causes a lot of back problems. And it was not until 1970 that our government outlawed the use of the short handle hoe, because there were so many farm workers, including my family, who were suffering from back problems from doing stoop labor like that. So now when you see farm workers in the fields, they use the long handle hoe, as you see in this next picture. And then the next picture, this picture was taken in Santa Clara Valley. We came to pick plums, and you can see on my brother carrying Trampita in the bucket, one of the buckets that we use for picking plums. And then next to the picture to your left is myself. I'm very pleased that I had filled my bucket with plums and had dressed Trampita in clean clothes. From the very early age of 6, my older brother and I had to work alongside our parents to make ends meet. Consequently, I missed a lot of school. I missed the first 2.5 months of school every single year. I would not start school for the first time until the first week or second week of November. Roberto, being the oldest in the family, he missed a lot more school than I did. He didn't start school until the cotton season was over, which was at the end of December, first part of January. Consequently, every time I started school, I was way behind my classmates. And one of the most difficult subjects for me was English, because we only spoke Spanish at home. And as a matter of fact, I failed first grade because I didn't know English well enough. And my experience in first grade was a traumatic experience because I went to class and I couldn't understand a word the teacher was saying. And I felt frustrated and I felt that I didn't belong there. And the only language I knew was Spanish, and we were punished in school if we spoke another language other than English. And so you can imagine how lonely I felt and how unwanted I felt, because when the teacher told me that I shouldn't speak English, I shouldn't speak Spanish in school, I felt that my language was not valued. And if my language was not valued, that meant that my culture was not valued. So that was a very traumatic experience for me. Anyway, one of the things that I used to do in order not to fall too far behind in my studies was that I used to carry a little notepad in my shirt pocket. And every day I would add a different English word and its definition. And I would memorize it to improve my vocabulary. I would also add other things that I needed to learn in school. And in one occasion, we were living in a migrant camp in Orosi, and the place we were living in burned down, and we lost a few things that we owned, including my little notepad, which was very dear to me. And I was terribly upset and crying, and my mother, being the caring and loving mom that she was, said to me, "I know you're upset, Panchito, but we should be thankful to God that no one got hurt in the fire." I said, "See, Mama, but I lost my little notepad." So she asked me, "Panchito, do you recall what you wrote in your notepad?" And I thought about it. And of course, I had memorized all that material. So I said, "Sí, Mama." And she responded, "Well then, Panchito, not everything is lost." And so I thought about what she meant, and I realized that she was correct, that she was right. That whatever I learned on my own using the little notepad, and whatever I learned in school, that knowledge would go with me no matter how many times we would move. So as I was growing up, when I was a child, I yearned for stability, for a place to call our own. I was tired of moving and missing school. And where I found a sense of permanence, of stability, was in learning, in education. So that's why I went into education, and that's why I value education so much. So the next slide, I was in the 8th grade in junior high in Santa Maria. And my father could no longer work in the fields because he had severe back problems. So to help support our family, my older brother, Roberto, and I got janitorial jobs working 30 to 35 hours a week each in order to support our family. And so in this, but the benefit of one of the blessings that came out of that situation was that we no longer had to move. So I could go to school year round. So I was in the 8th grade in El Camino Junior High, and I had 2 wonderful teachers, like to see in this next slide. Mr. Milo, who taught me math, and Mrs. Aylis, who taught me English and social studies. And when I was in her class, there was, in the morning, there was a knock at the door, and Mrs. Aylis went and opened the door, and in walks the principal, and behind the principal was a Border Patrol officer. And as soon as I saw the green uniform, I froze. I felt I felt like running, but my legs wouldn't move. And I felt that my whole world had ended. I was scared, confused, and the Border Patrol officer then took me out of the classroom and put me in the Border Patrol car and drove to Santa Maria High School to pick up my brother, and then to Bonetti Ranch to pick up other undocumented farm workers who were there. So we got deported back to Mexico. And what I just related to you is what I wrote in the first book called The Circuit, in this next slide. The stories from the life of a migrant child. I relate these stories from the child's point of view, hoping to make them accessible to both children and adults. And the shirt that you see there, or the picture that you see there, was taken in Corcoran. And behind that checkered shirt, I'm wearing suspenders. I figured how to hide them. I just put the shirt over the suspenders. The book is published, I published it in Spanish with the title Cajas de cartón, as you see in this next slide. And then the next slide. This is the sequel to Breaking Through. After we got deported, we came back legally thanks to Ito, the Japanese sharecropper for whom we picked strawberries in Santa Maria. He loaned us money, and he sponsored us. So we came back legally and settled permanently in Bonetti Ranch, where then I continued working as a janitor alongside my brother to help support our family. So in this book, I talk about what that experience was like while I was in high school. Still struggling with the English language and coping with poverty and a difficult situation at home. So in the next slide, this is a high school I attended in Santa Maria. The next slide. I had two counselors. Mr. Kincaid was my counselor when I was a freshman in high school. And I remember one of the things that Mr. Kincaid said to me. He said, looking at your schedule, I think would like to put you in a vocation track. And I said, what is that? And he said, well, you can become prepared to become a farmer. And I said, well, no, I don't want to be a farmer. I want to be a teacher. And he said, oh, so he says, so you want to be a teacher? That means you have to go to college. And I said, well, yes, but he said, college is expensive. He says, but there are scholarships if you get good grades. So I said, okay, so could you please then put me in a different track? So he put me in a college track. And then, and so Mr. Penny, you see next to Mr. Kincaid, was my high school, my senior year college advisor, high school advisor. And Mr. Penny made it possible for me to go to Santa Clara. He he suggested that I give my job, janitorial job, to my little brother, Trampita, so he could continue helping support my family while I would go to college. And thanks to him, I was able to fill out application forms for scholarships. I got local scholarships, and I also borrowed money from the federal government to pay for my first year in college. So Mr. Penny was a guardian angel. He sent the Spanish teacher to talk to my father in Spanish, because my father didn't speak English, to convince my father to allow me to go to college. And thanks to him, I was able to go to college. In the next slide, while I was a sophomore in high school, I had a wonderful teacher, Mrs. Bell. Mrs. Bell was very difficult, but very effective teacher. She asked us to write stories, things that we experienced. And so I wrote about Trampita in one of the chapters of when he was very sick, and we thought he was going to die. So Mrs. Bell read the essay, and then she asked me if it was a true story, and I said, yes, it's a true story. She got teary-eyed and she said, you know, Frank, my name was changed from Francisco to Frank when I was in first grade. She said, you know, Frank, if you continue working as hard as you have been, you're going to succeed. And then she said something that I will never forget. She said, you know, you do have writing talent. And so she then gave me a novel to read by John Steinbeck, The Grapes of Wrath. And it's a very thick book. And when I saw it, I said, when am I going to have time to read such a thick book? But she said, but you get extra credit for reading it. So when I started reading the book, I could not put it down. Even though I had to look up for all the vocabulary words and many vocabulary words, I could not put it down, because for the first time, I was able to make a connection between my personal life, my family's life, and the family, the Joad family in the novel. The Joad family were migrants from Oklahoma who came to California during the Dust Bowl, and they suffered discrimination just like my family had experienced that. They also worked in the fields and suffered injustices. And so when I was reading it, I realized that my story was also part of the American story. For the first time, I realized the power of literature to move hearts and minds, the power of literature to change lives. So thanks to Mrs. Bell, later on, I began to think about writing my own stories. In the next slide, the book is published in Spanish, Senderos fronterizos. In the next slide, this is the third in the series, Reaching Out, where I describe my experiences as a first-generation college student at Santa Clara University. And the picture that you see there appears in my naturalization papers. I became an American citizen when I was a junior at Santa Clara University. The title Reaching Out refers to how I reached out my first year for help. When I started my first year at Santa Clara, I felt completely out of place. Everyone around me seemed so much smarter than I, much more experienced than I. I began to get to feel inadequate. I began to feel that I was not capable or able to succeed in college. And so when I began to have doubts, that's when I began to reflect, to think about those childhood experiences that I went through to give me the courage not to give up. So I began to jot down those experiences that I related to you earlier. And I compared my situation then to a man who is drowning. A man who is drowning uses the water, the very substance that threatens his life, to save himself. Likewise, my childhood experiences that are initially pulling me back, I use those experiences to boost myself up and not to give up and to continue my studies at Santa Clara University. But I would have not been able to succeed without the help of my faculty at Santa Clara, especially the Jesuits. They reached out to me to help me succeed. One of the chapters in this book is titled "In Solidarity." And the next slide, I talk about how my senior year, I joined Cesar Chavez on that march to Sacramento to help inform the Farm Workers Union. And when we arrived to Sacramento on Easter Sunday, as you see in this next slide, I heard Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta thank all of us who had joined in that march for doing so, for supporting him. And then he talked about the importance of social justice and of using our whatever we telling us that we could help do and make a difference, and should make a difference in the lives of others if we sacrifice part of ourselves. And as I was listening to him, I looked at the banner of La Virgen de Guadalupe behind him, and I made a promise to myself that I would do everything possible in my life to help alleviate the plight of farm workers. I had absolutely no idea how I was going to do that, but I made that promise at that point in time. And then when I went to graduate school, and the next, the book is Más Allá de Mí, it's the Spanish edition. And then the next slide, when I finished college, I received a fellowship, the Woodrow Wilson Fellowship, to attend Columbia University to get my doctorate and to become a college professor. And when I had the fortune of having a professor who was from Mexico City, who was a writer, and I showed him some of my recollections that I had written down when I was a freshman at Santa Clara University. And he said, you know, this is good stuff. You should put all this together and write a book. And so with his courage and thinking about what Mrs. Bell said, with his encouragement, I began to put all these ideas together. And as I began to write, I remembered the promise that I had made to on that march to Sacramento when I joined Cesar Chavez. I began to realize that the best way that I could help the plight of farm workers was to write my experiences, to give people an insight into the work, the noble work that farm workers do. And so, so that's what encouraged me to write these stories. I wrote them to chronicle part of my family's history, but more importantly, I wrote them to document the experiences of many families from the past and the present, families who work very, very hard every single day for very low wages in very difficult environments. And thanks to their hard and noble work, all of us are able to enjoy our meals every single day. And what sustains these families day in and day out, working very hard, is the hope and dream of having a better life for their children and their children's children. So these families then inspire me professionally, and they have inspired my writing. So that's why I write. So I would be happy to answer questions at this point. I realized that I gave you a quick summary, and with not too much detail, but I hope that during the conversation and during your question and answer period, I can fill in some of the gaps that I made. The book is also published in Spanish with the title Pasos Firmes. And in this book, I talk about my experience at Columbia University. So thank you for listening to me.
Thank you so much. That was amazing. Really, really. We are going to be able to ask you some questions. I would like to introduce our moderator for our fireside chat. He is not a stranger to any of us. And we are going to have the honor of having Mr. Manny Barbara, former superintendent of the Oak Grove School District. He's an advisor to CEO at SVEF, and he has been selected 4 times as the Administrator of the Year by the Association of California School Administrators, and as Educator of the Year in 2008 by 100 Black Men of Santa Clara County. And during his 10 years as a superintendent, the performance increased for all district student subgroups, including the number of students successfully completing algebra and geometry by the end of 8th grade. So we're so happy to have Manny here to continue the conversation and help ask your questions and facilitate a conversation. Thank you, Manny.
Thank you very much, Denise. And Francisco, it's good to see you again. By way of introduction, back in the 1970s, when I was a school psychologist before going to administration, I had the opportunity to participate in a program at San Jose State where they were training psychologists and speech therapists in Spanish. So we, from 8 to 6 for 6 weeks. And during this time, they brought in different guest speakers, and we're all young. And then this young man came in talking about his experience. And that young man was Francisco, and he was a huge hit. And we were all inspired by his story. As an immigrant myself, there were similarities and differences. And about, I guess, 20 years later is when you wrote the book, The Circuit. My only objection to your books is they're listed as young adults. They are not just for kids, folks. In fact, somebody just indicated that they read it in college. Your books are inspirational. They're simply written and emotionally charged. I found them just powerful, and it's an honor and privilege to have this conversation with you.
Thank you. Thank you.
One of the things that you talk about, about the immigrant experience. And I think what's so powerful about these books is how you humanize the experience. It's so much, we can make people look like other, we just talk about migrant workers and so forth. And there was a part of the story that I'd like you to elaborate on a little bit and to talk about the impact of the family when your brother was ill.
Yes.
In the beginning and close to death, really. You talk about, and I was reading, and it's like, and I couldn't help think of like the fear of your parents going through and just just that hook. Could you just elaborate a little bit on that, just the pressure on your parents and the family just to survive?
Yes, it was my little brother whom we called Torito. We were living in Tent City, and he got very, very sick. I had convulsions and terrible diarrhea, and we didn't have health insurance. So we resorted to a curandera, a healer who lived next to us. She came to our tent and tried to cure Torito with the knowledge she had of different herbs and so forth. But Torito kept getting worse and worse and worse. And out of desperation, my parents took him to the county hospital. And the doctor told my parents that Torito might not survive, that we had taken too long to see the doctor. So my parents, being very religious, made a promise to El Santo Niño de Atocha, little baby Jesus, that if he could cure Torito of his illness, that we would make a pilgrimage. So we also, as a family, prayed every single night, every single day for Torito to get well. And eventually Torito did survive. And so I call that story in the circuit Miracle in Tent City. Torito's married, and we still call him with children, and we still call him the Miracle Child. But I thinking about my parents, they try to protect us from, especially me, because I was scared that Torito would not survive. And my parents kept saying, no, he's going to be okay, you just don't worry. But I could see in my parents' faces the anguish, the fear of Torito and not being able to survive.
So, given your experience, and I'm looking at some questions here, so I want to make sure I get to this. But I want to ask this question, and then I'm going to ask some questions that are coming in. You mentioned Mr. Kincaid, who
Yes.
was critical when you had that conversation. I remember reading that in the book where, he was talking about first you're going to go to the vocational class, and you said, no, I want to go to college. And then you talked about Mr. Penny, who I got to kick. Your mother referred to him as Mr. Centavo.
Yes.
Penny. I thought that was really kind of funny. But let me ask you this, and it's kind of related to, and I'll ask you the question directly about today's immigrant experience, but let's pretend for a second that Mr. Kincaid, instead of saying to you, oh, you want to go to college, because counselors can be gatekeepers, right?
Yes.
Would you have had the grit to continue? What if he would have said to you, look, listen, Francisco, you don't have what it takes to go to college. Stick with these classes and you'll be fine. What if he would have said that to you? What might have happened?
Well, we were raised to respect teachers. So whatever they said, we had to obey them. And so I would have gone along with it, and my life would have been totally different. But when I said that I wanted to be a teacher, then he said, well, then I have to, change your schedule and put you on a different track. And but I had no idea what college was like.
Right.
I knew when he said, if you want to become a teacher, you have to go to college. And the reason I want to say this, the reason I wanted to be a teacher is that I had a great, wonderful sixth grade teacher, Mr. Lema, who during his lunch hour, he would help me with my English language. And Mr. Lema, he didn't speak Spanish, but he valued my Mexican background And he knew that I enjoyed Mexican music after I established a relationship with him. So he offered to help me play the trumpet during his lunch hour. And I was so excited, here I'm going to play the trumpet just like mariachis do. And so when I got home, I saw that everything was packed in cardboard boxes. So we moved, and I never learned to play the trumpet, but I took Mr. Lema with me. When I was doing the research for the book, I went back to Visalia to see if I could contact him to thank him for what he did for me.
Yeah, because to me, as I was reading your story, that seemed like to be such a critical point in your life, and so many students have those kind of interactions with counselors as gatekeepers, and that really stood out. Thank you. I have a question here from our audience. What are your thoughts of today's immigrant experience? So you went through this a long time ago. We have the students going through it today. How do you see the connection?
Yes, what I said earlier, that my story is not unique. It's really the story of many families from the past and the present. There are families who are going through the same experience that my family went through many, many years ago. It's in the valley, in the San Joaquin Valley, and many of them are undocumented, and they work very hard so that their children can have a better life. And it's very hard because they don't have the resources. The kids come home and the parents can't help them with their homework. In many cases, they don't have a formal education. And then of course, they, like me, I didn't have a typewriter at home, but I would learn. So, when you think of those things, my heart goes out to them. And so when I have the opportunity to go to communities where there's a large number of farm workers, I give presentations to thank the parents for the hard work that they do, and to encourage their children to continue their education in spite of the obstacles that they encounter. And when I talk to teachers who are my heroes, when I talk to teachers, I indicate how important it is for teachers to value the children's native language and culture while they're learning English. Because after all, it's the language, our native language, that identifies who we are. And we communicate who we are through language. We communicate culture through language. So if my language is not valued, my native language, then the message is that I am not valid as a person. And that can be devastating. That's why I was very, I was a proponent of bilingual education when I served on the Commission on Teacher Credentialing.
Yeah, and I think, that's the similarity, obviously, between your experience and today's immigrant experience is how do we make the experience that the students come to us as something that's valued and that we can connect with.
Exactly.
Rather than as a deficit, right?
Right, and they do bring a lot of value because the first of all, their native language is an asset. And their own experience with their parents who are struggling to make ends meet. That experience, I think, can be very valuable to the other students in the classroom to know. That they do have knowledge that they don't have and experiences they don't have. So yeah, I it's important for them for teachers to understand that.
We talked a little bit about this in the pre-planning, and then I'm going to ask kind of a question here from Elisa, and I'm going to lead into it this way. One thing that you talk about the common immigrant experience is sometimes there's that imposter syndrome, like we don't belong, right? You talk about it in the book, like even something as simple as like, the rest of the kids didn't have suspenders, but you did. So you stand out. You go to high school and you don't have a typewriter. We just saw it with the pandemic, right? All of a sudden, everyone needed to work on Zoom. But hey, guess what? Not everyone has a computer at home. So can you talk a little bit about how you overcame your own sense of that imposter syndrome? And then Elisa's question has to do with, aside from keeping your hope high, how do you keep your motivation up and avoid depression? It's kind of like going through all these obstacles, and here you are now, obviously very successful, a famous author. How do you deal with that at a personal level?
Well, the first question, I still have that shadow behind me all the time, as with the imposter syndrome. And I can't help it. I mean, it's just there. And sometimes I think, no, that I'm not deserving of this, or I'm not sure I'm the person that I am. But it's and how do you overcome it? I really don't know. My own children tell me, when you give a talk, you over prepare and so forth, and you know the story. And I tell them that, I have to do it well, because I don't have that confidence that I can relate relate the stories the way that I wanted to be related. So yeah, it's let me give you another example. When I applied for tenure at the university, I had a colleague who's no longer there, said to me, you won't have any problem because you're a Chicano. And I said, I find that very offensive, that I have to work twice as hard as you do, just so that I can be accepted for what I have done, and so I feel that burden that I carry with me, that I have to do everything as well as I possibly can and cannot fail, because if I fail, I'm afraid that someone who has prejudices or will say, you see, you give them a chance and they fail. I think that happens to women, they're put in high positions and CEOs, and I talked to some individuals who feel the same way. They feel that kind of pressure, that they can't fail. And I don't know if I'm explaining it correctly.
Yeah, no, I think even, it's a challenge that people of color, immigrants experience. I know Beverly Tatum talks about it in, Why Are the Black Children Sitting Together in the Cafeteria? It's that sense of like, somehow you don't deserve what you have.
Yes.
Realizing the hard effort, and honestly, as I read the books, your father to me was almost like a semi-tragic figure. The pressure, the challenge, the health issues.
Yes.
To think that somehow that was easy is, you have to read the book to kind of capture.
Yes. My father worked very, very hard, and he suffered tremendously. He had ulcers, he had back problems, and when he could no longer work, he felt that he was a burden in our family. And as you know, he eventually left our family.
It was painful to read.
Yeah. It was, yeah.
Yeah.
And, one of the things that, and he died in Mexico, by the way. And when we visited him, and he said to me, mijo, I'm sorry that I failed you and our family. And I said, no, papa, you didn't fail me. As a matter of fact, your dream, you said, you crossed the border with the dream of having a better life for us. And thanks to your sacrifices, your dream has come true.
Yes.
Well, mijo, that's nice of you to say so. Yeah, but you know, I have a lot of respect for my father. He's deceased, of course, but
Yeah. Yeah, I almost saw your book as almost the story of your father in a lot of ways, when I just, all the issues he had to deal with. And, you know, as you're talking right now, him feeling that he failed, and yet, if you read the book, it was anything but failure with that. In fact, you know, we talk about the imposter. I think it's your brother that wrote the poem where it ended with recalling the house that could,
yes,
that casa that no longer shames me.
at Trampita.
Yeah.
Yes, when we were living in the tent city, we took the bus. We used to take the bus to school, and then the bus would drop us off in tent city. But when he started school, he would get off the bus in front of a house, because he was ashamed that his classmates or the kids in the bus would know that we lived in a tent. And so he wrote that poem later on and said,
Wonderful poem.
yeah, beautiful. My house
Yeah.
no longer shames me. Yeah.
Okay.
It's Trampita.
Yeah,
Trampita.
it's an excellent poem. Here's a question from Jackie. How do you feel the school system supported your children as ALA students get through school? So I don't know, they're talking about your own kids on here, but I mean, by the time your kids were going through, but maybe just kids in general, helping them through English as English learners.
How do you help them to succeed?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I think some of the things that we were just mentioned, to see, to believe in them, that what they bring to the class is as an asset, that they value their language, and their respect and value their culture, and you know, make them feel at home, that you care for them. Gesture makes a huge difference. The way you treat them, you know. One of the things that I didn't put in the book, and I should have, I think, is that Mr. Lema, you know, my sixth grade teacher,
Yes.
book, he did a unit on geography, and he put a map with all the different names of the cities. And then he called me to the front of the class and he said, you know, Frankie, he used to call me Frankie because I want you to pronounce these names, because I don't have that pronunciation, the correct pronunciation. So I went to the front of the class and I started with San Diego, Santa Barbara, San Francisco. And I felt like I felt like I belonged there. That one little thing that he did.
Just that.
That made a huge difference. So you find something that the child can excel in, and have them share it with the others and praise them for them. And that makes a huge difference. When students ask me, because I encourage students to go into teaching, and they say, well, what's the most valuable thing you need to become an effective teacher? And I said to them, you have to love your students. You have to love your students.
I think that's terrific. I think that probably a lot of kids would probably agree with you on that one for sure.
Manny, to lead into that with that conversation, there's a Spanish question here.
I was just going to get to that from Rosario. Go ahead.
Yeah. So the question in Spanish is, ¿Han sus libros cambiado las políticas en el sistema educativo norteamericano a favor de los niños inmigrantes que no hablan inglés? And for the English speakers, the question is, have your books changed the politics in the American education system to favor the immigrant students who don't speak English?
Se la voy a contestar en español. Gracias por la pregunta. Creo que en cierto sentido sí mi obra ha cambiado la actitud hacia los inmigrantes de parte de algunas personas, de algunos lectores. Y la prueba es que me mandan cartas indicándome que gracias a mi obra han apreciado o aprecian mucho más las dificultades experimentadas por los inmigrantes. Así, y esa es la esperanza que yo tenía, que a través de mi obra los lectores pudieran tener una comprensión, un aprecio, un respeto a todos los inmigrantes, cuyo trabajo, ¿verdad? Noble, todo trabajo es noble, cuyo trabajo en gran parte ha levantado la cultura y economía de este país.
I'm going to follow that question. Marie has a question here, and I'm going to get to that because they're kind of connected to my final question, but I want to get to this question now. There's a lot of talk that's going on right now with, oh, college is overdone. Why do we have to go to college? There's so many other jobs that you don't need college. What's your response to that?
I cringe every time I hear that, because I think the college does prepare you to in a certain profession, but to think of college only in an economic sense makes no sense to me, because what a college education does is enriches our lives. It gives us the tools to become much more engaged in our communities and be effective. And as you know, education is necessary in order for us to have a healthy and strong democracy. If we don't educate our citizens, our democracy is going to suffer. And we can see that's happening. And when people say, you know, you don't have to go to college. And I think of people, for example, who become electricians or plumbers. Having a college degree, even if you decide to become a plumber or an electrician, it enriches your lives in many ways. You know, it exposes you to the humanities, to the sciences, so it enriches one's life in many ways. Yeah. And for those for young people who are listening, education gives you the choices of the kind of work that you want to do and the kind of life that you want to live.
And of course, a lot of times when people talk about college is overrated, they're talking about other people's kids, not their own kids, right? So we get into that.
That's right.
So Maria has a question here, and it's kind of tied into my final question to you. Her question is, how do we help teachers begin to believe that all students are lovable and capable? And the question I was going to end with, kind of tied into that, is what would you, if you can go back to, what would you want teachers to say to all the Franciscos that are out there now, starting their school experience, kind of getting to Maria's comment about how do we help teachers believe in them? And if you could wave a magic wand, what would you want educators to do to kind of help these students break through as you did?
Well, as I said earlier, I would say to believe in every student, to believe that every student can succeed, and that every student has a talent or a different talent, a different gift that they have that you have to, you need to capitalize on and to value that gift and use it to make that student feel wanted, to feel valued. That to me is important to understand that every child can learn. Every child can learn. They have different ways of learning, but every child can learn. And every child has different talents, different capacities. So it's important to value every child. And I know that it's a challenge for teachers because, you know, they have large classes and you can't get to all of the students. For example, one of the things that I did when I was teaching at Santa Clara, students would come into class and I could see, I look at their faces, and if I saw one face that was down, you know, kind of looking down, not very happy, I would walk up to that student, put my hand on that student's shoulder and say, you know, I know it, you must have had a bad day. You know, if you want to talk to me about it, you know, you can talk to me after class. I mean, and many of them wouldn't, but they felt, you know, that you cared for them, that you had empathy for them. Yeah.
And that makes Francisco, thank you. And just as you know, you mentioned that college is not just for economics. You know, reading your books, you're not going to be economically richer, but I will guarantee everyone you will be richer as a person. They're just wonderful. Thank you for spending time with us. It's been a pleasure and honor. Thank you.
Thank you, Manny. Thank you so much. Thank you. And thank all the teachers who are listening. Without you, I would not have succeeded. So I have the greatest respect and admiration for teachers. So thank you.
Thank you.
Please don't leave yet. We're not quite done just yet. Don't forget.
Yeah, as we move forward, you know, bringing closure, again, Francisco, I just can't thank you enough for you taking out the time that I know you're busy working on projects, but to spend this time with us is amazing and very significant and important. And for me, validating all the reasons why I do the work that I've done with English learners, and you still are saying some of the same ideals that I've always believed in. So thank you so much for validating those concepts and strategies and comments around what we need to do for students. Thank you so much. It was just amazing.
You're welcome.
We are coming to the close, and we would like folks to have opportunity to get some of your books, but just a little challenge, I guess, is to continue to think about when you go to your organization, how you can have another conversation or continue these conversations if you're working with students, ensuring that, you know, teachers have that, not only that efficacy in themselves, but also helping to build that within their students, that they can believe in themselves. And it is so important as we move forward in trying to make them to be successful. So that's one thing. And also when you come to our next one in November, we'll get collateral out as soon as we can as to what those are going to look like. But our bold conversation will continue in November. And we have a great season and series planned for you. So please invite 4 or 5 more people to come. And then the other thing is, if you think about time, I know I started a racial biography and I did complete it. And it does take a lot of time, but it does help you be reflective on a lot of the ideals that you have for yourself and for folks that you actually, okay. Someone's scribbling on my chart, but just try to, and you can do it through pictures, images, but it's a really great way to document, things that have happened in your life as you move forward and start to be able to tell your story. We always want the stories to be told, and we try to make sure through our conversations that we're telling stories also. So those just a couple things we can think about doing, and please continue to spread the word. So with that, is there another slide, Valeria, or are we going to look at the wheel now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but before that, give me one quick sec. We are actually gonna ask you guys to please, if you can, scan this code. We'll also send it out after the meeting. Please take 2 minutes to take our survey. We really appreciate your feedback. It helps us to improve in our future talks. And again, your feedback also helps us, develop future events as well. So with that, hooray, it's time for a giveaway. So as promised, if you signed in, we will be doing a raffle of one of these. Well, we'll get one of these books at random from Francisco Jimenez. We are gonna have 10 winners, so stay put. Let me pull up the wheel because we love a wheel around here. All right. Everybody who signed in should be on here. And our first winner, let's see, cross your fingers.
Move with the rhythm, shake it up, stop on the top.
Woo-woo! Okay, it's Gretchen in the room. If you are, just unmute yourself and say, I'm here.
I'm here.
Yay! All right, we have our first winner. All right, 9 more winners to go.
Move with the rhythm, shake it up, stop on the top.
Catherine, are you in the room?
I'm here.
Yay! All right, that's our second winner. All right, third winner.
Move with the rhythm, shake it up, stop on the top.
Wow, that was close in. Lori, are you?
Hey, I'm here.
Yay! All right.
Hello.
All right, fourth winner. Let's go.
Move with the rhythm, shake it up, stop on the top.
Rosario, are you in the room? Yay, okay.
Thank you.
Okay, and then this is our 5th round. So let's.
Move with the rhythm, shake it up, stop on the top.
Diana, are you in the room? Do we have a no-show?
Oh,
I think we do. Okay.
keep going.
All right. 5th spin again.
Move with the rhythm, shake it up, stop on the top.
Laura, are you in the room?
Yes, I am.
Woo, woo. Okay, our 5th winner. Let's go into our 6th winner because we have 5 more spins to go.
Move with the rhythm, shake it up, stop on the top.
Sharon, are you in the room? Ooh, do we have it? Okay, Sharon's here.
Get off mute. All right.
All right. All right, 7th spin.
Move with the rhythm. Shake it up, stop on the count.
Nancy, are you in the room? Do we have another no-show? Looks
No,
like
Nancy.
it. Okay, let's do the spin one more time.
Move with the rhythm. Shake it up, stop on the count.
Are you in the room?
Thank you. I
Yeah, okay.
appreciate it.
All
It was
right.
great.
Thank you so much for staying. Let's go into our 8th spin.
Move with the rhythm. Shake it up, stop on the count.
Juan, are you in the room?
Ah,
I think Juan might have left us a little early. So we're gonna move on to the next person.
Move with the rhythm. Shake it up, stop on the count.
Rada, are you in the room? I really hope I pronounced that correctly.
Yeah, I'm here, Rhoda.
Okay, yay, all right. Okay, 9th spin.
Move with the rhythm. Shake it up, stop on the count.
Elisa, are you in the room? Yes, I see you. Okay, all right. Last spin. Everybody cross your fingers.
Move with the rhythm. Shake it up, stop on the count.
Alita, are you in the room, Alita?
I am on the room. Thank you.
Yay! All right. Well, that concludes our spinning wheel. I hope you all had a wonderful time, both with the wheel and the presentation. Please continue to fill out our survey. Again, I will send it out again in an email, and you will have access to the recording for this session through our SBF website, but I will also link it for you guys.
and
Thank
how
you
would
all
they
so
get,
much.
how would they get their book?
If you want a book, thank you, Denise. If you want a book, you gave us your shipping address, it will come to you magically in the mail. Thank you all so much for joining us this afternoon.
Quick questions for you, Denise. If I want to start my racial biography today because I'm so inspired, what is the most actionable item that I can do right now or guide my student to do so?
I would start looking for pictures. That's how I started mine. And then put notes next to them so you can kind of remember what's going on. But the images really help a lot.
All right. Thank you all so much for the questions again. I hope that you all got an answer. And please join us for on the next both conversations. Since you all did come today, you will continue to get reminders about upcoming sessions because they are all just as inspiring.
Gonna be great ones. Thank you, everyone. Really appreciate
Bye,
your support.
everyone.
Thank you so much.